now is our favorite part, or my favorite part. I hope it's yours too, the Hearts and Minds segment. Franklin, are you there?
Oh, there we go. I'm here.
All right, let me unshare. Hey, how you doing?
Doing all right. I'm doing all right.
Good, good. Well, thanks for being here. How are you doing?
I'm good.
I should always check in with people. Sorry.
I am very lucky. Everyone in my life is healthy and happy and safe and sane. My younger brother was just made an attending an emergency room in sort of like distant Queens, so he's sort of in the belly of the beast, but has had a pretty good experience so far, I think, under the circumstances. And he's a former professional athlete, so his entire thing is about preparing his body before he goes into work. So I think if anybody is going to be well prepared for an ER environment like this, it's he. But yeah, no, look, I've got 4 generations of my family still here, still healthy. I certainly cannot complain. And then work is weirdly busy at a time when not everybody's is. So I feel.
All right, let's get to that in a second. I'm really excited to hear that because that's a success story. And
strangely, yeah, which only makes the moment more surreal, honestly. But again, I certainly have no right to complain about anything given the state of the world.
Okay, so before we can understand why work is going well for you, why don't we just, Hollywood is a complicated place. When I moved on to working with other industries, as I've worked in Hollywood, mainly directly for, 10, 15 years, and then created Zeitguide and moved to New York. It's a complicated business, right? I mean, there's producers, there's agents. I tell everybody when they ask me about Hollywood that, Entourage, that show, is basically a documentary.
It is surprisingly accurate. And I don't know how many people want to admit that, but it is actually a surprisingly accurate portrayal of the industry in toto.
It hasn't really changed that much either, but we're
No, I mean, it is changing, but I think the core truths of it remain true.
Okay, we'll get to that too. So tell us, Franklin Leonard, what do you do in the business? I'll try to contextualize it to help people understand how it works. And just tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think the best way to do it is just to sort of blitz through my career as fast as possible, because I think that'll explain the context.
Perfect. Excuse me for 1 second, Frank. Can everybody hear Franklin?
Yeah, can everybody hear me? I can move. I've got my podcasting set up here as well, so if the mic is better, I can move it closer. You tell me. Is that better? Is that better? It looks
Definitely.
Like it's better. All right. So, look, I moved to Hollywood in 2003 after working at McKinsey & Company for 2 years as a business analyst, focusing primarily on media and entertainment, but not exclusively, because most business analysts at McKinsey are generalists. And prior to that, I'd been a writer for the Guardian newspapers in Trinidad, where my mother's father's from. And I ran a congressional campaign in Cincinnati, Ohio, right after I graduated Harvard for a guy named John Cranley, who's now the mayor of Cincinnati. But I arrived in Hollywood in 2003, having done a bunch of different careers, but essentially as a black kid from Georgia who loved movies. And the industry is, I think, by design, opaque and Byzantine. I was an assistant at CAA in the motion picture literature department, so working for
an agency.
Working for an agent who represented writers and directors. I did that for a year. Then I got an executive job, a sort of junior executive job. So basically think about being a junior producer at a production company. There's somebody else who runs the company, or there's a piece of talent, an actor or director who is the face of the company. Maybe they have a producing partner who does a lot of the work. I was their employee who didn't necessarily answer the phone, but was responsible for doing things like reading every screenplay that came in, reading every manuscript that came in. Increasingly now, it would be playing every video game that people submitted for adaptation, presumably looking at every cereal box that could be adapted for characters into a movie or television show. And very quickly, I realized that most of the stuff I was reading sort of fell in the category of mediocre to bad. And I say that not to disrespect the writers who write screenplays, but really as a tribute to the writers who write really good screenplays. It is a craft and a skill that is worked on, and the ones who do it well are truly extraordinary. And the ones who don't, who do it just well enough to get in, to the industry, but maybe not when you read their script. Your view of the world changes. When you're reading 30 scripts a weekend, as I was, because I'm a big nerd and knew that like being more of a grind than everybody else was going to be my competitive advantage, you come back on Monday morning and your boss asks you, did you read anything that I should read? And you have to say no, and you've essentially wasted 30 hours of your weekend.
Right.
And I'm not exaggerating sort of with those numbers. So, somewhat early into my time as a development executive, I was working for Leonardo DiCaprio's company. This is in 2005. We were deluged by material because Leo was arguably the biggest movie star in the world, and if you got him attached, you had a go movie. So I would read everything, I would pass on everything, and I felt like I was either bad at my job, which was finding good material, or the job was reading bad scripts and passing on them, in which case my mother's weekly phone calls asking me if my LSAT scores were still valid was something I should take more seriously. And I really, really did not want to be a lawyer, though I will admit questioning that decision in the last 3 years. But so I basically took a survey of my peers and said, send me a list of your 10 favorite screenplays that haven't yet been produced. In exchange, I'll share the combined list. I did that anonymously at the end of 2005 and didn't give it any second thought. Came back from vacation having read the scripts and recognizing that for me, they were really good. And I realized very quickly that everyone in town was talking about this thing, the Blacklist, that I had created. And I didn't tell anybody that I had created it because I was.
What year was this about?
This would have been January 2006, sort of returning into work after the holidays. And, you know, I was certain that I was going to get fired from my job because I figured, look, this isn't world-breaking genius surveying a bunch of people about their favorite unproduced screenplays, but I assumed there was some unwritten rule of Hollywood that explained why people hadn't done it yet. So I just sort of kept it quiet. And then about 6 months into that year, I got a phone call from an agent at another agency pitching me on a client. And they ended the conversation by saying, hey, look, don't tell anybody, but I have it on really good authority. This is going to be the #1 script on next year's Blacklist, which was amusing because I wasn't going to make another Blacklist. Here was somebody pitching.
Yeah. Just to kind of just explain. So the Blacklist you created was a list that you thought were the best unproduced screenplays.
Not that I thought were the best unproduced screenplays, that 75 people that I surveyed thought were the best unproduced screenplays.
So you kind of like crowdsourced before it was.
I literally crowdsourced, yeah. I was sort of crowdsourcing from a wise crowd. And because they were experienced with screenplays, etc. But what was interesting is this was a guy trying to sell me on his client using the speculative notion that the script might be on a list that might exist in 6 months. And the funny part was he didn't know that I wasn't planning on making another list, but even if I had been, knowing what's going to happen 6 months from now in a survey is just a bold-faced lie, right? It would be like me telling any of you that I know what's going to happen on November 8th, 2020. We don't. Basically, I was like, okay, this thing has value that I created. Let me do it again. And I've done it every year since then. This past December was the 15th year. And really, the scripts that have been on the list have gone on to a lot of great success, as have the writers. There have been about 1,200 scripts on the list. About 400 have been produced. They've made about $27 billion in worldwide box office. They've won 55 Oscars, 4 of the last 12 Best Pictures, and 12 of the last 26 screenwriting Oscars. And maybe most excitingly, Harvard Business School did a study at the end of last year looking at the first 15 years of Blacklist and trying to see, is there a correlation between the financial success of movies that were on the list? And what they found was controlling for all other factors, whether the agent had representation, the studio, the marketing budget, the budget of the film itself, the genre. Movies made from Blacklist scripts make 90% more in revenue than movies made from scripts not on the Blacklist.
All right, so I have so many questions.
Yeah, no.
And I just think it's one of the things that I think really inspires me about that story, as all entrepreneurs who create something from nothing into something that mobilizes to something successful. One of the reasons why I wanted you to tell your story after reading so, and also knowing you, is that that's sort of kind of like the energy we need to have right now during this coronavirus. Right? You saw that there was, while you were working on that agency's desk, agent's desk, that there was a problem, one problem, a white space and you created the Blacklist, and this was, you know, something that became really successful in Hollywood. So that's an inspirational story. Let's move forward to the business of entertainment in Hollywood. Obviously, I just gave you like a cultural landscape of what's happening. I'm sure I left a lot of stuff out, and that's why you're here. What are some of the conversations, would you say, that people are talking about? Now, just to give you all the cliff notes of how it works in Hollywood, I'm talking about the producing a movie or a television show. You have the producer, and I'm just being really on the surface. You have a producer who makes a movie or a television show or anything. The agent usually sells the piece of talent to the producer. It gets funded either by a studio or by a financier. Then they make the movie, they package it, they distribute it at some point. It used to be movie theaters, now it's on Netflix, and which is one of the things that has been even more disrupted by this. And there's a marketing department that markets the movie in all different ways. So if you have all those, and then the exhibitors, the movie theater shows the movie in a movie theater, and then you have these new streaming platforms that'll, you know, beam the movies or the television shows onto your house. So was that a good distillation of how?
Yeah, I think that was an incredible 60-second distillation.
All right, good. I guess that's what I do for a living, right? So now that that's all happening, and Hollywood was pretty disruptive before this happened, right? Technology, Netflix disrupted the original ways that content was delivered to consumers, right? Absolutely. Either went through cable television or it went to the movie theater. Right now, it could go directly to the consumer. So technology was a disruptor to the business. How is Corona?
Yeah, I'm good.
You okay?
Yeah, I'm good. Sorry.
So how is Corona? And then I want to hear how you're facing it.
Yeah, I think you sort of covered it with the magnifier and accelerator sort of terms. I think that the coronavirus has magnified, let's say, organizational and systemic failures across the country, across the world, and also within Hollywood. And I think it forces an acceleration of trends that were already happening, particularly that, are sort of pro-technological. A friend of mine and I were joking that if it came out that Reed Hastings had single-handedly done the genetic programming of the coronavirus, it wouldn't be the most unreasonable thing.
He's the CEO.
Yeah, Reed Hastings is the CEO of Netflix, basically, because they are the profound sort of structural beneficiaries of this. They are, in many ways, prepared for a world when people are reluctant to be around other people outside of their households. And a world where we want everything at our fingertips, and it doesn't matter if it comes from the US or Germany or Mexico or China or India. What we just want is the ability to disconnect from the world for an hour or 2 or 12 and have it be available at a sort of comparatively low cost rate. So I think magnifying and accelerating literally every trend that we've seen, I think would be the most succinct way to describe it.
So we're all going to stay home and continue to watch content, and you're going to be making movies that go directly to Netflix?
I mean, probably. I mean, I think that I love the theatrical experience, but I think the theatrical experience has been, a sort of legacy institution that the folks who run the theaters have been desperately trying to preserve without necessarily improving the value proposition that they're offering to consumers. Fundamentally, I love going to
long lines, traffic jam.
Yeah, exactly. Or just
uncleanliness.
Uncleanliness. It's not comfortable. We're still offering the same food items. There's any number of things. And I love going to the ArcLight Theater here in Los Angeles because it is a premium experience, and I'm willing to pay a premium in order to attend it, to be able to choose my seat ahead of time, to have a different set of snacks, to get a drink at the bar before I go into the theater. And the fact of the matter is, the theaters where I grew up in West Central Georgia have not sort of continued to improve their product offering to consumers. And when consumers have myriad other ways to spend their time and money. And by the way, we're not even talking about the realities of coronavirus. We're talking about the video game revolution. We're talking about the fact that it's very easy to get a very large flat screen TV for under $300 in your own home. I've long thought that we're heading towards a convergence where it's basically just content on screens. And it doesn't matter if the screen is 3 stories high or 3 inches wide, or if it's a movie that's 1 episode 2 hours long, or a series of episodes that are 10 minutes long. At the end of the day, it is all scripted visual storytelling delivered to people who will hopefully be emotionally moved and enraptured by that storytelling. And I say that as someone who loves theaters, who will continue to go to theaters to his dying day. But, if you are a legacy industry who is trying to change around the margins and not fully reimagine what your value proposition is to consumers, you are falling behind, period, whether you're in Hollywood or any other business.
Huh. And so what's going to happen then? And is anything different going to happen with coronavirus? I mean, again, just the conversation you've been hearing, I don't think anybody knows.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is that most people don't know. And anybody who claims to know with certainty anything at this stage is a person to be skeptical of. I don't know that we
I used to say that before. Like, people call me a futurist, and I'm like, if anybody who says they know the future is bullshit.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. And especially at this time, right? Like here are some of the many things we don't know. We don't know when it's going to be possible for people to go back and shoot content safely outside of their homes with other people. We don't know whether there are going to be rolling lockdowns throughout the world at various times. So you may be shooting a movie and you wake up tomorrow and, oh, by the way, the entire town you're in is locked down. You're not shooting anything. We don't know if you'll be able to get insured for productions because of that. We don't know whether there's going to be a vaccine. We don't know the extent to which testing is going to be possible. We don't know whether an antibody test that is positive actually matters, because there's the possibility of reinfection, and the World Health Organization suggests that actually may be an issue. So given all of these things, there's just not a lot of certainty right now. So anyone claiming to have a solution within a context that's unknowable is by definition a liar. I think
what do you think about all these, like, is everybody going to self-digitalize themselves? I mean, if this continues, if production can continue, and they're going to have to do everything with a mask. There's going to be no sex scenes.
I think people will figure it out. It will just take time.
Right.
I think you're going to see a rise in animated content, because that you can do now. I think that you're going to see a rise in smaller productions, right? Like, it's going to be a lot easier to go out into the desert with 2 people and shoot a movie with a bare bones crew that is willing to take risks and maybe signs a waiver than it is to make a $200 million movie that shoots on 5 continents, right? Like, those are very different things from a production standpoint. And so I think that there's likely to be a spike in that direction. But again, I wouldn't necessarily feel comfortable asking actors, best boy grips, to put themselves at risk, even for a 2-person film, until we have some degree of certainty, some degree of sense that we are not jeopardizing somebody's life to make something that may or may not be a profitable, important piece of content that people may or may not enjoy.
That's great, because not everybody here is in the media and entertainment business. We have a lot of retail. We have a lot of people who are in HR. We have a lot of people in branding, advertising. It seems like that is the theme that percolates throughout every industry, really, is that it's really going to be about testing the vaccine and what do we see, but kind of it's this whole social distancing and really, being apart from each other is really where every business is going to start going into, right? Would you say?
I think so. Again, I'm not an expert, but my sense is that the social distancing protocols were primarily about smoothing the impact of COVID-19 for our hospital capacity, and allowing us to increase our capacity while we avoided a giant spike that would result in more death because our medical capacity was overwhelmed. So I don't think we know enough about the virus yet to know what protocols are best going forward once we've increased the capacity to manage, a sort of mass infection situation. I don't even think we know how, and we don't know how many people are infected. And until we have sort of mass testing, until we have some sense of reliable antibody tests, we're all just speculating. So I'm sort of loath to do it.
Doubting
My sense,
if
but
it
my
is.
sense is, I think it's really important that we remember why social distancing is placed. It is not inherently to protect any of us individually. It is to manage a sort of social problem, which is in the event of widespread contagion, the hospitals will be overwhelmed. They will not be able to sort of manage the load, which will make the death rate much higher. And if we can smooth that out, increase medical capacity, we as a society have a much better chance of sort of making it and reducing the likelihood that somebody dies if they get COVID-19 or they break their leg and have to go to the hospital.
That's so hopeful. Well, because we don't have that much time, I'd like to end on another hopeful note. You
Yeah,
said that you're actually surprisingly busy right now in
very.
terms of what you do.
Yeah.
Why is that so?
Look, the one thing, so in addition to sort of this
And your
annual list
business
of,
is kind of on hold too.
yeah. So in addition to doing this annual list of Hollywood's most liked unproduced screenplays, 7.5 years ago, we built a website that allows anybody on earth to upload a screenplay, pay a small fee to have it evaluated. And if it's good, we tell the entire industry, like, hey, this is a really good script from a writer you might not know about. You should probably do something with it. And we've literally gotten hundreds of writers signed, a couple dozen movies have been produced, and we're now producing as well. And so we've essentially built ourselves into a company that focuses on the one thing that everyone in the industry can do right now, which is to read screenplays and develop material. And so I've gotten a ton of incoming emails from sort of A-list talent and directors saying, hey, a client has read through everything they've been offered. We need to find more scripts for them to read that they may be excited about. You seem like the right person to ask about good material. And so for the last 6 weeks, my team has been putting together a ton of care packages for A-list actors and their representatives, A-list directors and their representatives, and it's been really positive because as those folks read and come back and tell their reps, like, these were really good, we're then able to provide them with more. And a lot of these scripts are coming from writers who aren't necessarily represented at a major agency. They're not even household names in Hollywood. They are regular folks from all over the country and the world who've written a good screenplay, and hopefully we'll have a chance to sort of break into the industry in a real way once the pandemic is over, and potentially even while it's happening. I mean, we're producing movies for writers who don't live in LA right now, and meeting with directors via Zoom, and we'll presumably meet with actors via Zoom to begin to put these things together so we can hopefully make them after the pandemic is sort of, we've returned to semi-normalcy.
If there's another insight that everybody could glean from this, is like, this is a great time to be creative. So if you had been creative, you'd be hired to be creative. If all you do is sit at home creating, right, writing, and if you want to come up with a new idea, which I think that most of the people on this call want to, whether it's for themselves or for a company that they work for, this is the best time for that. Like,
Yeah, I want to
it's
go
not
back.
the Corona age; it's the creativity age. So,
I want to go back to one thing that you said really quickly, Brett, and that is the notion of the term reimagination.
oh, okay.
I think that in this moment, there may be an instinct to, to make change at the margins to protect your business, your company, in what feels like a moment of acute panic. I think it's really important to realize that there is no, for practical purposes, going back to normal after this. The world will have to be reimagined, and all of our businesses and all of our industries will have to be reimagined to compensate for it. Even prior to this, if you were a person who is looking to make change at the margin rather than have a constant reimagining of what the ideal structure and sort of function of your business is, in all likelihood, you are part of a legacy business that's just trying to protect your institutional position. And in a world where things like Corona are more likely to happen more often, you are going to get unseated. It may not be this time, but next time something happens that radically reorganizes society, you will find yours. What's that?
Climate change.
Yeah, exactly. You will find yourself on the outside looking in, and you'll be, like a lot of theater owners about this troll thing, saying, we're just not going to screen these all of Universal's movies. And it's like, okay, Sure. Contribute to the beginning of your own demise.
I love that. All right, we'll end on that because we literally have 2 minutes left.
Sorry.
Just wanted to say again, this was the 7th culture class. Oh, and thank you, Franklin.
No, my pleasure.
You're very inspirational. I love your story, and you gave us a lot of great advice. So I just wanted to say that moving forward for the month of May, we have 3 new points of view. Like I said, this is our 7th class. And next week, I met this new guy named Simon Lorenz, who is a founder of a telemedicine startup called Clara. So I want to get into his mind and seeing, what is the future of telemedicine? How has it been impacting people's lives now? And what is it like to be, a founder of a startup right now? Krista Carone, we're going to go into sports and brand marketing and experiences. She's the president of CSM Sports and Entertainment. And then Charles Renfro, who's an architect of Diller, Scofidio, and Renfro. He built the High Line and so many other, or designed the High Line and so many other major buildings around the world. We're going to talk about the future of architecture and what social distancing could do to buildings all across the world. So sorry that we didn't have times for questions, but if you have any, just put on #ZG Culture Class. I'm at Bragro and at Zeitguide, and we'll try to answer them. And thank you again for coming. I love that this community keeps growing, and let's all keep learning together. And thank you, Franklin.
No problem. I'm at Franklin Leonard on Twitter, so feel free to ask me questions there. I spend more time there than I should.
Especially now. So the Twitter's going to survive.
Ooh, yeah, probably.
All right, everybody. Have a great day. Stay safe and sane. That's what I say, Franklin. Healthy, safe, and sane.
Exactly.
All right. See you later.